of the Wacom Cintiq 24HD. Now, the last time I did a video like this was for the 12-inch here, and that was about 4 years ago. And since then, I've learned a lot, and I'm not going to make the same mistakes I did then, which was doing it at 3 a.m., trying to talk real low, and being accused of sounding like a transvestite. Anyway, this is the 24HD right here. You can see how big it is compared to the 12-inch. Right here I have an HP LCD monitor as well, which is the exact same size and resolution as this, so you can see how they stack up against each other. Let me zoom out real quick and I'll show you how it stacks up to some other things as well. So here you have my nerd corner. On the far left there you can see a PlayStation 3 and 360. It's a little bit dark, but on top of that you have a 22-inch television. In the center you have that 24-inch monitor I was talking about, and on the far right you obviously have the Cintiq 24HD. Here you have a close-up comparison with the Cintiq 12WX, a 20.1-inch monitor, a 2-pound bag of lollipops, Gimli's helm, and a wombat hugging a can of Diet Mountain Dew. Here I want to show you how to manipulate the Cintiq 24HD. On the side there are these levers that let you rotate it back and forth from an upright locked position. You can also work at it from this height, which lets you sort of work on it like an easel. Underneath there's a lever that releases it and lets you lower it to the edge of the table so you can work on it in a very natural position. What you can also do is put it back up, put your keyboard underneath it, and bring it back down. That way you can have access to your keyboard fairly easily just by lifting it up and sliding your hands underneath it, so you're not keyboardless or it's not off to your left or something along those lines. There's also two little stands that pop down from either side, so if you don't lower it all the way below the edge of the desk, you can have it so it's settled on the desktop because it only locks in the upright position. Now I'm going to talk about some of the features I really like about this. Some of them are carried over from previous Wacom products, but I'll just touch on what I think is good about it. I mean, first and foremost, it's the size of the thing. As you can see, it's like having a small desk on your lap. There's tons of room to draw, which is fantastic. The resolution is just huge, you know what I mean? It's the size of a 24-inch monitor, but you get to freaking draw on it. You know, you turn it on its side, it's almost like, you know, an 18 by 24 pad of paper. Maybe not quite that big, but it's nice. Another thing is the sensitivity. Based on the new products and stuff like the Intuos 4 line, the sensitivity, it has, I think it's 2,048 levels of pressure. So you really get a good feel for it. It feels much more natural. Coming from the Cintiq 12, it didn't have as many levels of pressure sensitivity, and you wouldn't notice the difference until you've tried this, to be honest. Get rid of all that crap. The next thing is the scroll wheel. It has the wheel here, and there's 3 different settings on this side, and you have all the buttons here, and then you have the same ones on the other side, but you can map them to different things. So first and foremost is the scroll wheel. You can zoom in and out with it. It's a little bit smoother than this. This document's kind of big, so it's a little bit jittery. So you can zoom in and out with it, and then you can also set it to brush size, which is fantastic. And every time you click this, it tells you what you're switching it over to. So you use this for brush size. You can see the brush get huge and small. It's really easy. And then the last one is the rotate feature, which comes in handy because the one feature that this thing doesn't really have that the previous ones have is the ability to rotate. The old Cintiqs you could rotate to work on. This one doesn't have that because it's so big in the way it's mounted, but to make up for that, you can set it to rotation with the scroll wheel, which is awesome. The one thing that I'm not keen on about the rotation and the zoom, especially the zoom, the rotation is not so bad. If you set the sensitivity low, you can get it back to exactly the horizontal level that you had it at. The zoom, on the other hand, the zoom goes to all sorts of different, see, I'll rotate this back. There you go. The zoom level, you can't see it up here, probably it's too small, but it goes into all these ridiculous percentages. And if you've painted before in Photoshop, you know that if you're at an off percentage, the resolution looks kind of blurry. It's not as sharp. So like 33.3%, 66.6%, 50%, and 100%. Those all have really nice sharp edges, and everything is just it's a good resolution to work at. It redraws it at a nice sharpness. Whereas if you're using the scroll wheel to zoom in and out, you are going to get it to be blurry unless you manage to hit it exactly at one of those percentages, which is really difficult to do. So that brings me to my next point, which I think is great about this, because I have the keyboard underneath here, and I can lift it up and sort of slide my arms underneath it, which is really convenient. But for this, if you don't have access to a keyboard, it's difficult. There is on top of the thing here, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a keyboard button. and it makes the on-screen keyboard pop up that comes with either Windows or your Mac OS. And so if I want to get that exact percentage, I can just click there, hit 33%, enter, get rid of this, and then I'm at that exact percentage. And this is good for other stuff too. If you want to type in a layer name really quick, but you don't want to bother with the keyboard by lifting it up, you can just tap, 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 done. One of the other cool things about it is if you forget what you've set any of these things to, there's an info button you can press, and it'll tell you what they're all set to. And it's actually, it does change based on what you actually set these things to. So if I decide to change these things up here in this stuff, it'll update this with exactly what I set it to. The other cool thing is that if you ever have problems or want to change a setting, a lot of you know that going and finding your Wacom settings and changing pressure and all that other stuff is kind of a pain. So there's actually a button up here that makes it pop up automatically. And then you can just click it again to get rid of it. And on the very top edge of the Cintiq, you have all the different keys for brightness and contrast and stuff like that, which is typical. They're just really easy to access here. They did get rid of this touch strip zooms, but you have the buttons and you have the scroll wheel instead, which is really nice. What's cool about it too is that because it's so big, there isn't much of a need to zoom in and out when you're working. You can sort of hit like a 50% zoom level depending on the resolution you work at and sort of pan around if you have to, but you can work all over the place. And that's one of the great things about this model of Cintiq is the 12-inch one, if you got towards the outside edges of it, it would start to jitter a little bit. With this one, there's absolutely none of that. If you hold your hand still, it's exactly still, which is really nice because on the 12-inch, it was sometimes hard to hit certain buttons and menu items and stuff like that. What's also cool is that there is a USB port on the side, so if you're trying to transfer some documents, you can plug that in and get it right there. It's also really bright, which is really nice. It's not as bright as I would like it. I have an IPS panel for my HP, and that's like super bright. I think it's based on the specs, it's twice as bright as this. And you wouldn't notice it unless you had a really bright monitor because the Cintiq itself is really bright. But it's not a problem. The color representation is really accurate. I had very little fuss compared to, I would say, the 12WX. I still probably spent about a good half an hour calibrating it and getting my settings right. I don't have a device to calibrate it, but I do it by visuals based on my other monitors, so that was all right. Some of the cons. Because I think of this, you know, you have this like maybe like a 1/4 inch of plastic between you and the screen, it is a little bit blurry, actually. It's compared to another IPS panel, it is slightly blurry. It's not that big of a deal, but you do want, if you have two monitors, look at your other one just in case. It's not a huge deal, but it is noticeable if you're looking for it. One of the other cons is the keyboard access, but I kind of already discussed that with this thing. This isn't the best solution, but it's actually a pretty good idea, especially with putting the button on there. The calibration was a little bit of a pain, but that's anytime you get a new monitor. What's also nice about this Cintiq is it does have the feature of having the radial menu that you can bring up by clicking a button. So any regularly used functions that you have, you can access easily that way in case your keyboard shortcuts aren't readily accessible to you. All in all, you're looking at a fantastic product, which is no surprise coming from Wacom. It definitely improves upon the Intuos 4 line, the previous Cintiq, all of it into one awesome, awesome piece of equipment. If you're a serious artist, professional, I would definitely recommend trying to pick one up if you can afford it. You know, the two biggest issues you're going to run into are the price of the thing at $2,500 and the size of the thing. It takes up all the desk space I have left. But I'm extremely happy with the purchase. It was more than worth it, and being a professional, it'll end up paying for itself. You know, hopefully relatively soon. But that's it for the review, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. And I guess I'll catch you later.